This is Jody Sidlauskas, RIT Associate Archivist. It is October 17th, 2015, and we are here today for the Brick City Homecoming Weekend honoring the class of 1965, celebrating their 50th anniversary from graduating from RIT. And these folks that are here with us graduated from the downtown campus of RIT. And at this time, I have with me Dennis and Nancy, Nancy Cole Kitchen and Dennis Kitchen. They were in the class of 65, and after they graduated, they ended up getting married. So here we are. Thank you for joining us, Dennis and Nancy. Okay. So first of all, let me just ask, were the both of you here for 4 years, 1961 through 65?
Yes.
Yeah. And Nancy, you majored in retailing?
It was a business thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I majored in printing.
Printing. Okay. And where did each of you come from? Where was your hometown?
Rochester.
I was from Kenmore, just outside of Buffalo.
Okay. And how did you choose RIT?
Well, for myself, RIT, of course, was noted for having a printing management program. There were very few other schools that had such a thing, and I had been running my own print shop at home in the basement for a number of years. And I was also influenced by my junior high school printing teacher. So I kind of had gotten myself committed to the idea of majoring in printing management.
Did you look at any other schools, or was RIT your...
RIT was it.
Okay. And how about you, Nancy?
Well, I was scheduled to go to Geneseo for speech and hearing,
Oh,
and my senior year in high school, I started working at Sibley's, and the manager of my department, first I got into, back then 17 magazine had like college girls or something. We all got outfits like you'd wear to college, so she got me into that, and then she said, you really should go into merchandising, you've got a flair for it. And so at the very last minute, I said, I think I'd like to do that. So I switched and went to RIT.
okay. And RIT at the time was had a strong retail program.
It did, and I don't know about too many others. And I look back now and I think, I don't even think people go to school for that. They just go do it.
Right.
But
It's a different field now.
we definitely learned a lot more than just salesmanship. I mean, we learned a lot about textiles and economics, and it wasn't just, here's how you count money back.
No.
So obviously you wouldn't go for 4 years.
Right. And need a bachelor's.
Yeah.
One of the other graduates, I believe it was Linda from the program, said that a lot of the jobs required bachelor's degrees for being a merchandiser or a buyer or manager. Yeah. So your majority of your classes, what buildings were you in on the campus?
Well, most of our classes, my first year, were over in the Eastman building, the main building for the general studies classes, and then the ones that were specific to printing were in the second floor of the Clark building, which was right next door. So everything was kind of convenient, and we lived over in the men's dorm, which was the old Nathaniel Rochester Hall, and had been a former hotel, and that sort of thing. And we got to take a lot of classes in printing, which involve playing with machines, which frankly are just no longer utilized. Basically the printing industry involved a lot of hot lead and monotype machines and linotype machines and that sort of thing. Involved hand composition and pressmanship and all that sort of thing that you learn that from the technical end, and those things just. I mean, obviously, printing presses are still around, but all the pre-press process, as one would say, is done using other mechanisms, other processes, and hot metal's just not involved anymore.
Absolutely. And Nancy, how about you? Where were your classes?
Well, the majority of mine were on the Main Street building. Of course, I did general studies over in the Eastman building, so they were scattered. But of course, I wasn't going to anything that needed equipment particularly. And but
So 50 West Main building? Mm-hmm.
the odd thing is that used to be called the Naval Ordnance Division of Kodak, and my dad worked there, so he worked there, and I ended up going to school there. And of course, before he worked there, he went to school here. When it was Mechanics Institute.
Oh, did he?
So it's sort of funny. Yeah.
What program was your dad in?
Management, some sort of, I don't know, management thing.
Uh-huh.
I looked up his report card once when I was working at one of the offices. I could go through it. He actually was there.
So that's interesting. That same building,
Yeah.
repurposed, and
Yeah.
you both end up there.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Do either of you have remembrances of particular faculty members that you enjoyed, or
Well, we had
Had a-
our art teacher that we had him separately, but we both remember him profoundly.
And he was really an art appreciation class that he taught. What was it? Frank Clement, and he was memorable because he wore what seemed like to us old-fashioned suits. They were double-breasted, very tailored suits, very good-looking suits and everything. But apparently that was his style, and he had a graying hair and a neat trim
Distinguished.
mustache and that sort of thing, and he was very inspiring and certainly introduced me to an appreciation of art that I had never had before, and frankly I've retained since. I probably have more specific information from that class that is still just still running around in my brain more than any other class that I remember.
It's true. Like we've been to the Louvre, we've been to other famous museums, and we'll look at each other and remember. Oh, I remember.
That's right. That's
really?
So it was fun, even though we really weren't together. In it.
Yeah.
I remember Miss Hogadone,
Oh yes, Edwina.
She was a hoot. She didn't seem exactly a hoot then. She was a little foreboding, but I can remember, and this has stayed with me my whole life. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, and that was her motto. And if you went in there whining, she would just look at you. Going gets tough, the tough get going. So she didn't listen to much of your whining. That was her advice.
From a printing department, I will never forget Al Lawson. Al Lawson ran the hand composition room and also taught the hand composition to the beginning to freshmen and that sort of thing. I took a couple of courses from him there, and he was probably one of the most friendly and kind of fatherly kind of individuals, and seemed to take a liking to me and I to him. He taught a good deal about typographic design and that sort of thing. I thought was very interesting, and I remember discussing things of what somebody could do as a career, and I remember him mentioning the fact that at least one of the graduates from the printing department at some point had ended up going to law school and becoming a lawyer. And in fact, that's what I ended up doing. So
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
You think that he put the bug in your bonnet?
Planted
Well,
that
it
seed, huh?
Planted the seed. But, yeah,
Anything's possible
that's right.
then, huh?
That's right.
Wonderful. And you mentioned you lived in Nathaniel, Rochester. Where did you live, Nancy? Did
I
you commute?
commuted. Mhm.
Okay.
And for me, the retailing program was really great because I went out of town for my work blocks. So it gave me an opportunity to have roommates and to live on a college campus because we lived at a hotel that was right at Western Reserve University. So it was sort of the best of two worlds, or both worlds, because when you have time to sort of have a good time working,
Yeah.
that's when you had your roommates and you could do it. And then I came back and buckled down and did my work.
Did your
So,
schoolwork and lived at home, and
so
and so where was
There
your?
were-
This was like a co-op,
yeah,
as we
I
would
worked
call
at
it.
Higbee's.
Higbee's in
Higbee's in Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Yep.
And do you remember what sort of position you, or did you work
Well,
in multiple departments?
They had us all over. One of the places they had me was in personnel, and that sort of got my mind going in a little different direction. Another thing they had me do one year was create an art show up on one of the floors, and they used to do special events in stores that would get people in to see the events. And it was local artisans, and we set the whole thing up and marketed it and the whole thing. And that called on me to do more than most, I think, in that era. I wasn't folding clothes or anything
Right.
like that.
And it pulled out another
Yeah,
area
yeah.
and skills to work on.
And I ended up, when I went after school, I went with Ray Kumlers in Dayton and into the personnel department. So
Oh,
it was sort of interesting.
yeah. Those co-ops have been mentioned over and over, and how wonderful an experience they gave each of you, and how they influenced your careers. Yeah. And did they have co-ops for the printing program?
They did not. That was a straight 4-year program, and I'm not sure why they didn't come up with some sort of cooperative program, but they didn't. So it was pretty much. I mean, I would work during the summer, like at home, or in some cases, I actually. I remember difficulty finding a job at home, and I ended up back in Rochester and got some work there. But I only was in the dorm 1 year, and then I spent the next 2 years out in apartments at various, with roommates and doing various things. And I didn't. I pledged a fraternity in my junior year. Most guys did it in their freshman year, but I kind of waited. So for me, my senior year, I had to live in the fraternity house because that was a requirement when once you joined a fraternity, you had to spend at least a year there. So that was my senior year.
And was that the printing fraternity?
No, that
Oh.
was Phi Sigma Kappa,
Okay.
which I guess is the supposedly now the only fraternity that has existed back then in the 60s that is still on campus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and apparently they had a bit of a hiatus for the past several years because of some problems that arose. But none of the other fraternities, and there were only another, I think, three or four other fraternities on the campus back in the 60s that are still on the campus
exist.
now. Yeah.
Ah.
So.
Probably Phi Sig is in existence because it had to work real hard to get back.
Yes,
They were sort of thrown off. We don't really, I don't know why. But
we don't know the details.
but we probably don't want to know.
Yes. I know, I guess it had something to do with some partying, as you can well imagine.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I remember, when the first year we were there and everything, there were frequent beer blasts that were run by the typically of fraternities and or sororities, that sort of thing. They were always held off campus because campus was dry, even though we were right there in the city. And of course, most of the students could drink because 18 was the age.
Yes.
And so we'd go down to the Ukrainian American Club or one of these places that would have a hall or something like this, and there would be a beer blast, which was, typically paid $1 for the whole evening and that sort of thing, and you could drink as much beer as you wanted to, which when you're young and 18 and all that sort of thing is as much as you can possibly pour down your gullet. And
That's right.
at some point, I think in our sophomore year, the trustees in the school had made a change in their policy, and we became what was commonly referred to at the time as a damp campus. Not a wet campus, but a damp campus. In other words, they would begin to allow beer blasts on campus, which were typically over at the Ritter Clark gym, or actually I think like the wrestling room or something like that. Had a concrete floor or something like that. So they would actually run them there. And they ran similarly. And of course, I suppose things were better from the standpoint of, and not only control, but also the transportation. Kids weren't getting out and getting into cars and going somewhere. They
Sure,
were just,
yeah.
coming back to the dorms. So,
And then they could stagger back.
yes, right.
Now, extracurricular, I know you both fairly active during your years at RIT. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things you did?
Well, I didn't do a whole lot until I came back for my senior year, which was actually 5 quarters. I decided to get involved in student government, and somehow I got myself elected as a senator. And so that's really the only year that I can recall that I did too much, because we were in and out. You were here and then you were gone, and I wasn't much for beer blasts. I wasn't in a sorority. But anyhow, I did get very involved in student government. I started the drama club, which I had sort of forgotten.
Yes.
Until I saw the picture of it upstairs.
Yesterday
in
at the archives, we found Nancy in a photograph.
Yeah, and I went, oh yeah, I started that. And then I met Dennis, and we became really good friends, but he was engaged, so that we were just friends.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we used to do is go around to all the groups and teach them parliamentary procedure. You can imagine that you wouldn't do that now, but anyhow, we were actually quite sought after. So that was one thing I did. And then what else? Something else. I don't know. I had to have done something else than that. I'll think of it. Go ahead.
We'll give Dennis a turn.
The activity I kind of got pulled into early on was the Forensic Society, the debating team. I had never become involved in that before, and that was really interesting. It was run by a speech teacher, Joe Fitzpatrick, from the General Studies Department. And he had his crew of people, and I had never become acquainted with what intercollegiate debate were, and tournaments and things like this. And there was the way debate ran is there was a national proposition that was put forward, and then you would take the positive or the negative, or the affirmative or the negative side on that sort of thing, and then you would field these teams of and run these debates at various tournaments that would be held at various schools around the Northeast. And so got involved in that, and that was really interesting. I mean, just to work on that. And because of the nature of debate, that they were encouraged to get involved in things like student government. So beginning of my sophomore year, I went ahead and ran for student representative This was actually before the change in our Constitution. As a matter of fact, I was involved in writing, and Nancy was too, I think, and some of the other people in government to write a new Constitution. And it ended up with this student senate that was actually chaired by the vice president, and then the president had more of an executive position and that sort of thing. I was very much surprised at one of our previous visits here to the new campus to find that they were still pretty much operating under that same Constitution and bylaws, and it kept what they had.
When we were
what we
here,
had written.
when we did the Tiger, he did the
Yes.
Tiger interview.
Yeah.
They had the Constitution there at some room we went into, and we went, oh, look, they're still doing the
They're
same.
still doing the
And
same
that's
thing.
the
know,
one
and
you helped develop.
yeah, so
Wow.
that was great fun. But anyway, in student government, and by the time I got to my junior year, I was in charge of the publications, publicity and publications, which involved producing a student directory every year, and involved then doing other little kind of PR things or publicity or something like that. So I had already noticed, since of course at that time I was not yet involved in a fraternity, but I had noticed that the fraternities would do absolutely anything if there was a trophy at stake. Okay, so I went to a trophy manufacturer, one of these shops that put together trophies and stuff like this, and with picking one piece and another, we came up with a trophy that was something like about 37 inches high or something like this. You know, this is the tallest trophy. And so I put forth this poster, then this little thing, this ditto machine flyer that actually had a drawing of the trophy complete with its height in inches, and put that out. Well, immediately all the fraternities and a few other organizations signed up for this special event to get the trophy. And I figured, well, we'll just come up with an event, and then we'll give them the trophy, and then it'll be a traveling trophy every year. And the first event we came up with was a marathon dance, so
Okay.
which was easy enough to do, and we ran the marathon dance. And
Where
then
was that held?
that was held at the Nathaniel Rochester Hall, the men's residence, because being an old hotel, it had a bit of a ballroom and that sort of thing, and attracted a lot of participation and stuff like this. Forgotten how long the marathon went, but it pretty much killed most of 24 hours, I think.
And that was like a fundraiser?
It was, well, not really a fundraiser. It was just an event. It was just something to get, and
School
it did.
spirit.
Yeah, yes. And of course, we got the local media involved, and they came by and they took pictures, and they went thing on TV and stuff like this. And
Always in the newspapers.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, then the next year, we had to do something else, and so we came up with the canoe race. And we set that up out in the Genesee Park thing, where they had like not a casino, but some pavilion or something where they rented canoes.
Oh.
And so we set the thing up to rent a whole bunch of canoes, and again, the same trophy was at stake, and we got some interest going
The
there.
lure of the trophy.
That's right, and I got to putt around in a little power boat to kind of supervise this race or something like that. So that was kind of some of the fun things we
Fun
did.
things, yeah.
Well, you didn't even mention the Tiger.
Yeah, we
Oh.
should talk about the tiger.
Yeah, of course the Tiger wasn't my idea, but I was kind of pulled into the whole thing. That stock certificate, that might have been partly my idea, was the idea of issuing stock, because it was going to cost $1,000 to bring this tiger in.
This is the live Bengal tiger cub
that's right.
that the students had wanted to purchase from the zoo in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, well, they had gone to the guy who ran the zoo in Rochester, and
Mr. DeSabato.
I think-
DeSabato.
DeSabato, yes, that's right. And he, of course, knew, being a manager of a zoo, he knew who to call to get a hold of things like that, and knew we could get one. It cost $1,000 or something like this. And so we said, well, we'll come up with $1,000, and we figured how we're going to raise $1,000, and we got a little bit of seed money, I think, from student government, and then we came up with this stock certificate. Now, I remember going up to the hand comp lab and talking to one of the guys up there that did a lot of design and stuff like that, and he designed this stock certificate and everything. And then it was signed by three of us, which was me and Dave Page and Roger Kramer. Right? And by then, Alpha Phi Omega had been started fairly recently, the service fraternity, and so they became very committed to the whole thing. And they got involved with. We got the publicity for the tiger coming in, and that would be staying at the zoo. But could we take it out? Yes, we could, because it was just a cub. I mean, and playful and stuff like this. Of course, he's got paws, the size of ping pong paddles. So I mean, this is going to be a big animal one of these days. And he's got claws and everything, but he doesn't use them. So I mean, he was fun, and he'd bite a little bit, but it was that was all just like playing with a cat, a little kitty cat. But it was a big kitty cat. So we would get them out for things like basketball games, take them to basketball games, put them on a leash and walk them around, and and of course he attracted a lot of attention, and very photogenic little guy, and so that sort of thing. So it was only later that we found out that he'd contracted rickets or something, and then ended up dying. But,
Yes.
Yes, but of course you still have his skin here that gets shown every year.
That's
so.
right. The official pelt still lives in the RIT archives.
That's right. And I remember we had a contest too to name the tiger, and I wish I could remember who the guy. I wonder if it was Andy David Hazy. I think was
Yes.
the one who had won the contest.
That's how we understand it.
And came up with Spirit, Student Pride in RIT, and great name. Perfect name. So the rest is history, as they say.
And just to backtrack a bit, how did that whole idea come about? How did it get started? Like, oh, let's get a tiger. I mean,
Well, I honestly don't know who generated the idea at some, either, it came to them either in the shower or sitting around, a couple of
Having-
beers
yeah.
or something, and somebody, let's actually buy one. But Roger Kramer was one of these kind of can do, will do, type A type guys and stuff like this. And Dave Page, of course, was the tiger,
Yes.
and run around the tiger suit.
yes.
And that sort of thing. So it's easy to see how one of those ideas could easily get out of hand.
The enthusiasm of youth.
The enthusiasm of youth, but somebody took the initiative to find out. Well, let's talk to the zoo guy and let's find out if you can buy a tiger somewhere. So,
And RIT administration said,
well, they did, and of course they pretty much had a fit. I remember one of the pictures of one of the of a Miss RIT for that year, something like this, was there posing with the tiger. And of course, then I guess the legal department or the risk management people or something were kind of had a fit, and said, "Gee, we'll take this one whack of one of those clawed paws, and we'd have a super lawsuit." So they were pretty skittish. So
even back then.
that's right. They were probably fairly relieved when the tiger passed on. So
Yeah.
But then they got another one.
they did get another one, but they mentioned. I remember the article. It
Yeah.
said something. It was a 200-pound tiger or something
Yeah,
like
it
that.
was already a full grown.
That's
and they
right.
called him Spirit too, but stayed at the zoo.
Right.
Just
Because he's 200 pounds.
Yeah.
That's probably why they got a 200-pound tiger.
Yeah. So they probably felt a little more comfortable about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And just so you know, students today, whenever they come to the archives and we show the tiger pelt, they say, "Oh, we should get a tiger." And I said, really? Do you think you could do that today? You know, but what the students have done is they haven't raised money to sponsor adopting tigers in the wild
Oh, that's good.
and help preserving Bengal tigers in the wild. So that's how, and so there's a couple of them at the zoo that they actually sponsor and help the zoo pay for.
right.
So that's their way of sort of kind of continuing with that
And now
tiger spirit.
your mascot Richie. I mean, the suit for Richie probably cost more than the tiger did.
Right. Oh, okay. Oh, we talked about. So by the time you graduated, graduation was at the War Memorial, was
Yes,
it?
yes, it was. Oh, and Nancy's leg was a feature.
Oh yeah,
That's right.
Nancy's leg is featured.
On the
Yeah, that was the other
Democratic
thing I did.
Chronicler of the Times Union.
My leg was in the newspaper.
I'm gonna look for your leg. We
I
must
think
have
I
it.
I think I can probably find it and send you a copy.
You should. That would be great. So from there, what happened then? Were you together at that point, or did you go separate ways?
We went separate ways. I was engaged supposedly. I went off to, and my fiance had actually graduated a year ahead of me and was off getting her master's degree somewhere.
Okay.
And I went off to get a master's degree in student personnel administration at
Oh.
Indiana University. And
Oh.
the vice president of student personnel here at the time was a guy named Jim Campbell, Dr. Jim Campbell. And he was very, very well liked. If as much for not his own personality, but the fact that he was preceded by somebody who was not very well liked at all.
Okay.
And in any event, he had kind of inspired me and encouraged me to go off and maybe study student personnel administration and end up doing what he did, sort of thing. So I did that at Indiana University. But to study that sort of thing, which I find out it was not really my cup of tea. It was not suited to my personality. I was not suited to doing that sort of thing. So I, at that point, then went ahead and signed up to join the Navy, and I also my engagement fell through, and so Nancy and I reacquainted ourselves with one another, and eventually in 1967 I went off to the Navy, and when I got my commission, Nancy came down, and we went ahead and got married.
9 days later.
9 days later,
Oh,
and as they say, the rest is history. So
and how many years are we on?
48.
Oh.
Yeah. So you don't need a big wedding. We had a
Yeah.
very nice wedding.
We did.
But there was only 12 people at it.
Right.
You were smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole wedding cost $100.
Yeah.
And we had, guys with swords overhead to walk
Oh,
through,
yeah,
and
nice.
the fancy uniforms to wear, and
And I had this little short Jackie O
Yes,
little pillbox hat.
of course. Fabulous. And
Yeah.
so, after graduation for you, Nancy?
One of the things that was amazing back at that time was how we were pursued and how companies wanted us. And I went on at least 4 interviews where I was flown to the store, stayed in a hotel, went through a series of interviews, was wined and dined, and I had to choose which one I wanted to go to, and one of them was Strauss and something or other in Philadelphia. One of them was
straws and clothier.
yeah, and one was Riches in Atlanta, which I loved, but I ended up going with Ray Kumler in Dayton, The reason I didn't go with the one in Atlanta was because I was seeking a job in personnel, and one of the things they did down there was anyone that was color was fired on Friday and rehired on Monday, so they couldn't get any benefits. And so that I didn't think that was right.
Wow.
So, and there were some other issues, and I was going to be right in the thick of that. It wasn't like I was going to be folding clothes.
No, you were in that department.
Right. So, I did get an offer from Reichumler to go into personnel, and I did. I don't know why it didn't go that well. I mean, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. There wasn't much excitement in it. The one thing that was good about it was the hours were regular, but the job was not very cool. So I thought, I'm too far away from home to be doing something that I think I made a mistake as far as the career choice. So I came back here and I went to work for RIT in the Alumni Relations Department.
Oh.
And I worked for Paul
Hassenplug.
Hassenplug.
Oh yes,
And
seen that
back
name.
then, our computer work we did on these cards, and we'd input stuff that they had all these holes, and it was a little corner about like this. That was the Alumni Relations Department. And
Were you on the Henrietta campus then?
no,
Still downtown.
downtown.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we hadn't moved yet. Actually, the office was in the Main Street building.
Yes.
So at that time, I reconnected with some of our friends, and one of them was Jimmy Black, and he told me that Dennis's engagement had gotten cut off. So I sent him a little letter of condolence and said if he was ever in the area to give me a call. And so not very long after that, he gave me a call. And
He
had
just
come
popped
back-
into the area.
Well, he did a very unusual thing. Tell her what he came back from Indiana while he was waiting to go in for pilot training down in Pensacola. He taught math in Buffalo, but in the meantime, he came over here every weekend. And
Oh, yes. Well, I had a friend from Buffalo who had actually gone in the Peace Corps. And he had just gotten released by the Peace Corps and everything and had come back. And anyway, he had this grand idea to start a singles club. There had been one in Buffalo called the Single Set. And he wanted to kind of duplicate that model here in Rochester and called it the Young Professionals. And so we set up in a little apartment on the east side and got a decent typewriter and everything and proceeded to do some advertising and stuff like this and produce a little newsletter and get people to show up and good grief, we had,
oh my gosh, there were
Must be.
1,000 people that showed up at the first one. We didn't know
the
what
first
to
one.
do.
We didn't know what
But
to
in
do.
the meantime, his friend Willie is driving around town in a rickshaw with this Young Professionals sign all over it.
That's right.
And I got involved with the promotion and stuff because part of what you learn in merchandising was marketing. So, but so then he went off to the military thing.
Yeah.
Heavens, I don't think there was. I mean, I guess that Young Professionals went for a couple of years,
It did.
but it never really
It
was
got
a living.
right,
It was just a
right.
lark.
Yes.
Sure.
But it was fun.
Something fun. Yeah, fun.
And so then so I was still at the alumni office, and then after that, I applied for a job at the Red Cross, and I became the college coordinator for Red Cross. And I went to all the different colleges in the area, of which there were 10 at the time. and promoted the Red Cross and the activities, you know, the CPR, all the different first aid classes, as well as blood and, you know, whatever they did. And so I had groups on every campus, you know, would be a, I don't know if it was a Red Cross club, but, you know, some sort of a presence on each campus.
Yeah.
So I did that for a year, but in the meantime, we had reconnected. So that the end of the year, I left and went down to see him get his commission, and then we got engaged and married in 9 days, and I didn't come back.
Oh,
I mean, I stayed.
Right. So we lived in
wow.
Yeah.
Pensacola for the next year or so. I went down to Corpus Christi. I got my wings, and then they plowed me back to the Pensacola to teach new pilots. So even though it was Vietnam was going hot and heavy, I never left the country, and ended up doing all my service there at Pensacola.
Meantime,
Wow, that
I
was
got
fortunate.
a job teaching retailing at a new vocational high school that had just opened up, and I just saw this school, and I drove in, and I said, "Do you need a a retailing department course?" Well, yeah, that'd be a good idea. That's how they did things back then, you know. That'd be a good idea. Well, I
Very
said,
good
I'll
idea.
start that. Oh, you will? Okay. So
It was that simple.
yeah, it was just that simple. You know, there weren't all
Right.
these. Well, I did have to go get certified as a teacher, but not to start. I mean, I did
Yeah.
go on then.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I used the model of RIT, and I like went out and got little co-ops for the kids to learn, and I taught them how to go on interviews. And of course, back then, they wore hats and gloves. Can you believe it? Can you believe it if somebody would go out on an interview with a hat and gloves? But that's what we did. And so I taught a portion of what almost everything I'd learned at RIT, but on a much more elementary level.
Sure.
And then I developed relationships with different stores and so on that would take the kids.
Oh.
So that was probably the best thing I ever did with my merchandising, although the marketing end of it, I have continued to use.
That's a lifelong skill. That's something
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can use in so many areas of your life. Sure.
And then we had 2 kids. And,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then
Fit those in there too.
Then I got out of the Navy, and then I was up in the Buffalo area, and for the first time, I actually used my printing degree and was an estimator at a folding carton manufacturer in Buffalo for about a year and a half, and
And he wakes up one morning and he says, "I'm going to law school here." I called him and told him I was coming, and they said, "Okay, bring your paperwork over." And he said, "I got to go to work, so take it over." So
So she did.
the school wasn't even built yet. I had to crawl all over this construction site with his LSAT scores and all this other stuff that they did require, even though they had told him he could come. And so he did that. He did his law degree in 2.5 years.
It was
instead
a
of 3.
UB.
UB.
Yeah.
And so
They
yeah.
were just building that north campus. So
Ah.
yeah, it's funny because I'd gone here to a downtown campus that moved into the
So
burbs,
this, yeah.
and so I ended up I entered law school after they had moved out of downtown, but it was another case of moving the downtown school out to the burbs.
To the yes.
And they hadn't quite done it yet. Like there were no seats in his classrooms. They
They had-
sat on the rugs.
They had these tiered classrooms, nicely carpeted and everything, but they hadn't got the seats in, and that took a half a year. So we all sprawled around on the carpeted tiers of the
Oh my goodness.
classroom. So that was fun.
About what year was this now?
This would have been
He graduated in '76.
so it would have been
Okay.
72,
70s.
2,
3.
2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, no, 73. 3, 4, 4, 5,
Well,
Wow.
Yeah, it was about 74.
You
I think
went
September
through-
74.
it was my 30th birthday,
Okay.
so it was 3, because I was
Oh,
born in
okay.
43.
All right.
And then you went into law.
Yep. And been doing it ever since. So I've been a lawyer about 35 years now, and on my own now for more than half of that. You know? So
Well, RIT's done well for you two.
yes.
Yeah, but meanwhile, I called up Clarence High School and told them I was coming. And they weren't quite like we're in the South, but almost. They sort of created a job for me there. And I supported the media in terms of computer graphics, video, and I taught holography, which is three-dimensional imaging with lasers, and we got an opportunity to get a grant, and so they asked me to write it, and I wrote it, and then for 10 years, we were quite well known for that. I actually went all over the world in some respects, because I did go to England, but all over the country, and gave lectures on why you should have holography in your classroom. I wrote books on having holography in your curriculum.
Oh, how interesting.
And, again, it was just sort of, you're rolling along, making it up as you're going along,
Yeah.
But again, it was back before core and all this stuff, and so I could get away with sort of working the system and not really having the credentials in some respects.
Exactly. Yes.
I couldn't get away with that then.
We should have asked. I wonder if they do any holography. RIT. I mean, we have imaging science. Why
Yeah,
not?
I should have asked that imaging.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
But it was quite an experience, and we did a big show one year at George Eastman House for a whole weekend. We went and made holograms every half hour. A different group would go in and we would make them. And this other friend of mine and myself, we went and we stayed overnight, and it was February, and we'd left the laser in the car and it froze.
Oh.
And we had no idea what was going to happen, but it was fine. It thawed out. There was no problems. But I mean, we literally didn't have another laser. If this thing hadn't thawed out by the time we had to go build the table and get everything all set up, and the whole time we're looking at each other like. So, and we had a piece at the National Geographic. Remember, we went down and saw that.
That's right. That's
Oh
right.
wow.
And we did a thing back and forth with Stratford
Oh yeah.
Shakespeare,
the
distance learning, and I don't know, that whole thing. And I did that when we were in England.
My goodness.
yeah.
So you
So
your
I used
career
a lot
path
of the
didn't go
marketing.
like
No.
this. Your career
No,
path
No.
jigged and jagged
You
like
just-
a lot
I
of
talked
people.
to that Linda, and she
Yeah.
did exactly what you should
Yeah.
do if you were a retailer.
Right.
She went in, she was this, then she became that, then
Yep.
she became a merchandising manager, then she became a whatever and a whatever, and she was the model
Yes.
of I was no model.
Nor was I. So
No.
you know.
But it worked out, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we seem to be doing okay.
Well, thank you so much on behalf of RIT and RIT Archives. We're so thankful that you took the time to meet with us today and record these wonderful stories. And we hope to see you again.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sure we'll be back.
Maybe you'll remember some more stories. We can do it
Maybe
again.
I'll remember what else I did.